3 days before our wedding, my savior prince betrayed me. I spent 5 years loving Alexander, believing he rescued me from a tiger's jaws. Instead, he used my noble blood as a shield to smuggle his secret lover, my own sister, into his bed. I wasn't his bride. I was his hostage. But the enemy king at the gates knows a secret that will burn the palace down. The man I married is a fraud, and the man invading my country is the one who actually bled to save me 10 years ago. Now the war isn't just for a throne, it's for me. The crown prince of the current court, Alexander Lu, was about to take a crown princess. Everyone knew that woman would be me, not only because my family was powerful, but because Alexander Lu and I had long been of one heart and mind. I'd liked Alexander Lu since I was little. When I was a child, a tiger chased me at the hunting grounds. Alexander Lu saved me, dragged me out of its jaws. Everyone in the palace and at the manor knew that story. 3 days before the wedding, the emperor summoned me to the palace. In the West Pavilion, I didn't see the bright yellow of imperial robes. Only the man I'd been longing for stood by the window. I didn't know why he would use the emperor's name to meet me. An unease curled in my stomach. You're not supposed to meet before the wedding. I'm marrying Lily Bai as well. I'm bringing her into the household. Alexander Lu's words struck like thunder, blowing my senses blank. He said he would marry Lily Bai as a side consort. He said they'd known each other since childhood. He told me to accept it, quickly. I stood there, stunned, for what felt like forever before I found my voice again. Cold sweat soaked my back. Lily Bai was my 7th younger sister, father's concubine-born daughter. She'd been brought into the manor only a month ago and formally acknowledged then. I felt nothing for her. To me, she was practically a stranger. A month ago. Wasn't that exactly when Alexander Lu asked the emperor for an imperial marriage decree to marry me? This couldn't be a coincidence. When did you meet? And does Lily Bai being acknowledged have anything to do with her marrying you? I clenched my teeth until I tasted blood. It was the only way to keep my mind clear. The tenderness in Alexander Lu's eyes was gone. He told me that the day he saved me at the hunting grounds, he'd been injured too and lost consciousness, and Lily Bai had saved him. Before she was acknowledged, Lily Bai had lived with her mother on Phoenix Song Mountain. The royal hunting grounds were nearby. Only then did I understand. From the very beginning, it had been a setup. To marry Lily Bai, Alexander Lu had laid out a 5-year scheme. I was the decoy, and I'd walked into the trap willingly, like a beast lured into a jar. Alexander Lu, break off the engagement. He lifted my chin, his grip biting into my jaw. The pain there didn't compare to the hollow ache in my chest. Lily's status is low. If you don't marry into the Eastern Palace, father won't agree to let her be a side consort. If you break the engagement now, that's deceiving the emperor. The Bai family can't bear the crime of deceiving the emperor. So that was it. He'd calculated everything. Alexander Lu was using me to blunt the emperor's concerns about Lily Bai's background. He must have already persuaded the emperor today. That was why I saw him instead of his majesty. It meant the emperor had tacitly approved the request. If I refused, I would drag the Bai family down with me. Even if I didn't want to marry, I would have to. For my family. The man I'd thought of day and night had been plotting against me for 5 full years. Back at the manor, father shut himself in his study, claiming he was busy and refusing to see me. I guessed he already knew, but couldn't change anything, and was ashamed to face me. I knelt before my late mother's spirit tablet. I had 1,000 things to say, but I didn't know where to begin. Hundreds of dark tablets stared back like silent eyes. Submit. Agree. This is your duty as a child of the Bai family. I knelt for 3 full days without food or water, until drums and gongs sounded outside. It was as if fate's shackles were tightening around my throat. My personal maid, Sadie, brought the bright red wedding robes. "Miss, it's time to go." They said I could think for 3 days. In truth, I had no choice at all. I put on the wedding dress and crown I'd chosen with my own hands. Guided by palace attendants, I moved through one elaborate rite after another. I'd rehearsed it countless times. Only today I performed it most perfectly, and most rigidly. Behind me, Lily Bai went through the same rites, entering the Eastern Palace in full splendor at my side. Only her smile held the satisfaction of a wish fulfilled. Mine held not a trace of feeling, only empty courtesy. That night, the attendants escorted Alexander Liu back to the room. They murmured festive blessings, their eyes flicking meaningfully to the white cloth laid on the bed. Too bad, they were going to be disappointed. The door closed softly. Alexander Liu and I looked at each other in silence. "Crown Prince, you should go. I'm tired, I'm going to rest." I lifted my hand to remove my crown. After holding myself stiff all day, I couldn't relax even if I tried. Alexander Liu frowned. "This is my bedchamber. Crown Princess, you've got nerve trying to drive me out." I was exhausted and didn't want to waste words. "Turn left when you leave. Phoenix Song Garden. Lily Bai is waiting for you." I didn't know why that line set him off, but Alexander Liu suddenly crowded in close. His tall shadow nearly swallowed me. The first night of the wedding, the crown prince sleeps in the side consort's room. What will people say about me? Better than living together while we hate each other. I pressed my lips together. Rage and grief burned through my chest. Alexander Liu was showing his true face, and I would be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Since he insisted on staying, I laid a quilt down the middle of the bed. If we had to share a room, then we would keep to our own side and get through the night without incident. When I was done, I lay down fully dressed. I didn't even want to look at him. I was afraid that if I did, the feelings I hadn't yet buried would surge back up. My refusal enraged Alexander Liu. He turned and stormed out, slamming the door. Fine. Why hadn't he done that from the start instead of talking about appearances? Bitterness churned in my chest. My eyelids grew heavy. Near dawn, a sound at the door startled me awake. Alexander Liu pushed it open. Without a word, he stripped off his outer robe and climbed into bed. My back went rigid. Irritation flashed in my eyes as that handsome face drew close. "Just for show," he said quietly. "Don't let anyone suspect." I said nothing. I turned away and edged inward, careful, as if I didn't want even the hem of his clothes to brush me. A large hand seized my arm and yanked me back. "Adeline Bai, do I disgust you that much? Didn't you like me? Then why not try to please me instead of acting cold and superior?" When Alexander Liu leaned in, I caught a faint floral scent, the powder Lily Bai always used. I steadied myself, forcing my face blank. "Since you don't like me, why do you care whether my heart is with you?" Alexander Liu curled his lips into a smile, his eyes cold and ruthless. "Fair enough. As long as you fulfill your duties as crown princess, I won't treat you badly." Treat me badly? What he'd done to me couldn't be repaid in a lifetime. I looked into his deep, complicated eyes. There was a thread of reluctance there, something I couldn't understand. After that, Alexander Liu and I lived like polite strangers. He was busy with state affairs and rarely appeared before me. Most nights he stayed in Phoenix Song Garden, only coming to my quarters now and then to keep up appearances. Not long after, Phoenix Song Garden brought good news. Lily Bai was pregnant. Alexander Liu spending so many nights in Phoenix Song Garden had already drawn plenty of criticism toward me. Now that Lily Bai was with child, the servants of the Eastern Palace grew even more neglectful, their eyes full of contempt. At least they still respected my title as crown princess. I kept the household running with order and discipline. When I caught the occasional snide remark, I simply smiled it away. But Phoenix Song Garden was lively now, and as crown princess, I had to show goodwill. "Sadie, send the bloodbird's nest the Empress just rewarded to Phoenix Song Garden. Tell them I'm unwell and won't be going." I truly was unwell. I'd just come back from paying respects to the Empress. She'd heard the news of Lily Bai's pregnancy too, and she pressed me at once about my own belly. But my marriage to Alexander Liu had been a scheme and a transaction. There could be no true marriage between us, and certainly no child. At worst, later I could help him take in more concubines. From the children they bore, I could choose one I liked and raise it under my name. With that thought, I had the attendants bring me the registry of eligible young women in the capital. If I was choosing concubines, then of course I shouldn't pick noble ladies of high rank. Better to choose girls of decent character. About the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, Sadie came running back, pale with panic. "Crown Princess, something's wrong. The side consort drank the bloodbird's nest you sent, and it disturbed the pregnancy." Lily Bai and I had never truly been at odds. She shouldn't be using her child to frame me. "Summon the imperial physician. Come with me." When I reached Phoenix Song Garden, Alexander Liu was there too. Physicians already crowded the room. I'd never seen Alexander Liu look so tense. When he saw me, the disgust in his eyes was unmistakable. Adeline Bai, you're jealous of Lily, so you harmed her child? If you have something to settle, come at me. So he didn't even investigate. He simply pinned it on me. The bloodbird's nest was a reward from the Empress. If you don't trust me, do you not even trust your own mother? I lifted the bowl of bloodbird's nest and hurled it down in front of the physicians. Tell him, is this bowl poisoned? Alexander Liu's anger flared. He slapped the bowl aside. It's this cursed stuff. What's the point of saying any of that now? If anything happens to Lily, I won't let you off. The crown prince raged. For a side consort, he humiliated his crown princess. With so many eyes in the room, everyone watched me, openly and in secret, waiting for a spectacle. All I could do was laugh. We'd been married barely 2 months. There would be many more days like this. When Lily Bai finally opened her eyes, Alexander Liu held her hand with aching tenderness, speaking softly to soothe her. The physician said the child was fine, but after such a fright, the baby might be frail and sickly after birth. Lily Bai cried and cried, urging Alexander Liu again and again not to blame me. She said she'd eaten something that didn't agree with her, and it wasn't my fault. The physician had also said she'd been oversupplementing. The bloodbird's nest was only the last straw. Crown Prince, how should this be handled? Lily Bai's personal maid held up what remained of the bowl, her resentful gaze sliding toward me without a word. Lily Bai snapped, "Take it away. Now. Don't leave it here to offend my eyes." The young maid still looked unwilling. But before she could finish, Alexander Liu cut her off, his brows sinking. Since when do people from Phoenix Song Garden get to question the crown princess's guilt? If anyone asks, it's me. Strange. Was he defending me? Lily Bai hurried to apologize. Alexander Liu couldn't bear it. He immediately pulled her into his arms. I didn't want to watch them. The 10 Kingdoms Festival is in a few days. Take Lily with you to attend. Consider it compensation. I'm unwell and don't want to see people. Alexander Liu rejected me at once. The crown prince of this dynasty attends the 10 Kingdoms Festival with a side consort? Adeline Bai, are you trying to make a fool of me? So whatever I did was wrong. Fine. Let him do as he pleased. I would simply turn blind and deaf, as if I couldn't see him. The incident at Phoenix Song Garden spread quickly through the palace. The Empress summoned me nearly 3 times a day to lecture me. Always the same refrain, get pregnant soon and secure my position. My ears went numb from it. In time, resentment took root. I didn't know whether she said the same to Alexander Liu, but after that, he came to my quarters far more often. He called it keeping an eye on me, so I wouldn't harm Lily Bai. I hated it. I contradicted him at every turn. If he wanted to sleep in the room, I went to the study. If he wanted a meal, I delayed the order. If he wanted to bathe, I snuffed the lamps and went to bed at once. After several rounds, he finally lost his temper. I thought he would leave. Instead, he pinned me to the bed and tied my wrists with the bed curtains. His sleeves slid down, revealing my pale arms. The vermilion dot on my skin was glaringly bright. Tomorrow is the 10 Kingdoms Festival. If the crown princess still has the virgin mark, won't people laugh at me? He lowered his head and pressed his mouth to mine, biting and tearing as if to vent his fury. His hands lit fires across my body. He buried his face at my neck and kissed me, hot, insistent. Addie, be good, listen to me. Rip, my gauze robe tore to rags and fell to the floor. Half naked, I trembled from head to toe. My mind snapped sharply awake. Nausea surged up. I drove my foot into him, hard. I must have been blind. How could I ever have fallen for a man like this? Alexander Liu clenched his teeth, hissing through the pain. He spat out a string of accusations about my ingratitude. When he left, he slammed the door and took the servants from my courtyard with him. The bed curtains cut into my wrists for an entire night. I stared into the dark, engraving every second of that pain into my heart. At dawn, the palanquin carried Alexander Liu and me away. Beneath the splendid palace robes, my wrists were swollen and raw, like the rot of my life hidden under a beautiful surface. Alexander Liu didn't show a shred of remorse. Fine, I had helped you marry Lily Bai. From now on, I would walk my own road. The Ten Kingdoms Festival was the yearly occasion when hundreds of foreign envoys came to the Wu dynasty to pay tribute. The palace filled with men bearing high noses and deep-set eyes. I smiled until my cheeks ached. My wrist went numb from lifting cup after cup. "So you must be the crown princess. I've heard much about you." Across from me, an envoy from the Bo Kingdom raised his cup. He was handsome, with glassy eyes and features that suggested mixed blood. As crown princess, I had already memorized every envoy's portrait and name. "I've lived deep within the palace. Envoy Julian Yuan, how have you heard my name?" He laughed openly. "And doesn't the crown princess know mine as well?" Then he clapped his hands, and two attendants carried in a massive embroidered screen. "The crown princess is skilled with brush and ink. Your spring play of dragons and tigers is majestic and alive. I admire it greatly, so I ordered the finest embroiderers in our court to stitch it into a screen as a gift." I was startled. I hadn't expected a foreign envoy to have seen my painting. "The envoy's kindness, I'll accept it on behalf of the crown princess," Alexander Lu said, suddenly gripping my hand and putting on a show of marital devotion. "In the future, gifts like this can be sent straight to the Eastern Palace." The envoy's expression shifted. "Envoy, you're too kind," I said lightly. "I'm afraid the crown prince didn't even know I painted that piece." On the surface, I was teasing Alexander Lu. In truth, I was warning him not to go too far. We only needed to appear harmonious and get through this. His edge was unnecessary. After a couple of drinks, my chest felt tight. I rose to get some air, not noticing that Alexander Lu followed. Before long, a burst of lively commotion rose in the courtyard. Over the lotus pond, kites danced in the sky. I drifted closer with the crowd and saw Alexander Lu and Lily Bai flying one together, affectionate as could be. So last night, when he took away my servants, it had only been to arrange today's surprise for Lily Bai. He feared she might feel neglected. A man with such cold, hard temper could also be so painstaking. My eyes stung. I turned to leave, but a careless young attendant bumped into me while running with a kite line. I threw out my hand to steady myself on the sharp edge of a stone. Pain shot through me. My strength gave out, and I toppled into the lotus pond. Someone fell in. Someone fell into the water. I couldn't swim. Sadie ran over, screaming in terror. "It's the crown princess! Someone, quickly save the crown princess!" Alexander Lu heard the shouting, but he didn't come. I saw it with my own eyes. Lily Bai clutched her belly, and Alexander Lu looked stricken. He didn't care whether I lived or died. My consciousness blurred. A dark figure leapt into the water and wrapped an arm around my waist. I caught a clean, spicy scent, and then everything went black. When I woke, the first thing I saw was Alexander Lu at my bedside. Dark shadows ringed his eyes as he dozed. His fingers rested on the back of my hand. How moving. And who was this performance for? Maybe it was the shock of nearly drowning. My head pounded. I forced myself out of bed and startled him awake. "Why are you getting up? Lie down and rest. Your hand is hurt that badly? Do you want to ruin it for painting?" "Alexander Lu, I want to show you something." I pulled a registry of names and a sheet of paper from beneath my dressing box and placed them in front of him. "This is the list of eligible young women in the capital. I picked 3 with decent character. And this one, the Minister of War's daughter. Gentle and agreeable, she'd make a good crown princess." Alexander Lu's face changed. "Adeline Bai, what are you doing?" I unfolded the paper. 3 characters stared up at him, painfully clear. "Divorce agreement. Alexander Lu, I want a divorce." Alexander Lu's expression twisted in an instant. "Say that again." He forced the words out through clenched teeth, one by one. I let out a slow breath. My hand was wrapped in thick bandages, and the sharp pain kept me painfully awake. "I helped you marry Lily Bai. If you have even a little conscience, let me go." "How dare you ask me for a divorce? Haven't I treated you well? Whatever you want, I can give it to you." Alexander Lu probably couldn't understand why Adeline Bai, living in luxury, still wanted to run. "Alexander Lu, what I want is something you can never give. I wanted your love. You gave it to Lily Bai. Now I only want freedom." Alexander Lu closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them, they were cold. "Wishful thinking. Starting today, I'll handle official business in your quarters. Until you change your mind, you won't leave this palace hall by so much as a step." With that, Alexander Lu swept out. I didn't argue. The result surprised me a little. but I'd expected it. Alexander Liu had always gotten what he wanted. He would never accept a woman divorcing him. He kept his word. From then on, he occupied the study in my courtyard from morning until night. 2 guards appeared at my door as well. Their watchful eyes made my skin crawl, like a prisoner under guard. So for the first time, I took the initiative and knocked on the study door. Alexander Liu called out, Lily, and when he saw it was me, his expression stiffened at once. I went straight to the point. I'm going to live outside the palace for a while. Think it over. I'll come back later to collect the divorce agreement. Where do you think you're going? To find that Bo Kingdom envoy Julian Yuan and keep flirting with him. When men throw tantrums, they can be louder than any woman. The day I fell into the pond, Julian Yuan saved me. I still hadn't even thanked him. At Alexander Liu's command, 2 guards came in. From the way they moved, they meant to bind me. Alexander Liu, imprisoning a woman, how is that any different from a common thug? I snapped. Just then, a young maid came running in from outside, Lily Bai's personal maid. Crown Prince, you must come quickly. Her Highness, she says the pregnancy is unstable. She's in bed and crying in pain. Ever since Alexander Liu moved to my quarters to work, Lily Bai's pain flared every few days. How could I not see through it? And yet Alexander Liu was always on edge. The moment he heard, he rushed off to soothe her. This time was no exception. Lily Bai must have heard I'd come to see him and panicked. I tricked the 2 guards with a few words. With Sadie covering for me, I disguised myself and slipped out of the palace. I stayed at the manor for several days. Then I went to the embassy to thank Julian Yuan, only to be told he and the other envoys had gone to the hunting grounds. Crown Princess, why not return first? When envoy Julian Yuan comes back, I'll report to you at once. I didn't know why, but I suddenly felt energized. The weather's fine today. One more trip to the hunting grounds won't hurt. The best archery master in the capital had taught me. Lately I'd been trapped in petty matters, and my hands itched for something clean and sharp. Phoenix Song Mountain. The moment I entered the hunting grounds, I felt like a hawk set loose. My horse thundered beneath me. I drew my bow and loosed arrow after arrow. In no time I'd filled my haul. Sadie, catch! One arrow pierced a wild rabbit clean through the chest. Its eyes rolled back at once. My aim was as keen as ever. Then leaves rustled in the dense forest. I went still. Only a large beast could make that sound. My horse sensed danger too. It reared and screamed. A tiger burst from the trees, white-browed, fierce-eyed, with a long scar carved across its forehead. It bared its fangs and charged straight at me. Childhood terror surged up. It was this tiger. The scar on its brow had been left by Alexander Liu when he saved me. Cold sweat broke out. I wrenched my horse around to flee, but a rider couldn't outrun the king of the forest. The stench of its breath felt like it was already at my neck. Addie. Who would call me that? So intimately. A figure appeared even faster. He drew and released an arrow that struck the tiger's front leg. In the next breath, he hauled me onto his horse. A familiar spicy scent filled my nose. It was Julian Yuan. The tiger wouldn't give up. In the blink of an eye, it was a single step away. My palms went slick with sweat. Forgive my rudeness, Crown Princess. As Julian Yuan spoke, he lifted me higher. The tiger's teeth tore at my hem. One heartbeat more, and I would have lost my leg. Julian Yuan drew a curved blade and slashed upward. A fresh, bleeding scar opened across the tiger's face. I stared, stunned at the line of his lean jaw. It overlapped, strangely, with the shadowy figure I'd seen while half-conscious all those years ago. Back then, it had been a 10 Kingdoms festival hunt. It wasn't impossible for Julian Yuan to have been here. But when I woke, I'd seen Alexander Liu, and his injuries had been real. My thoughts knotted tighter and tighter. Even after Julian Yuan rode us to safety, I still hadn't recovered. Envoy Julian Yuan, 10 years ago, did you save a little girl here? Julian Yuan's brows drew together. 10 years ago, when something happened to the Crown Princess, wasn't it Crown Prince Alexander Liu who saved you? Why ask that now? It wasn't that I was overly suspicious. Just now, in his urgency, Julian Yuan had called out my childhood name, Addie. My mind spun. I forced myself to steady it. Just curious, I came today to thank you for saving me at the Lotus Pond. I didn't expect to owe you another debt on top of that. I don't think I could ever repay you. Julian Yuan smiled. If you can't repay it, then don't. But there's something I'd like to ask. That day at the Lotus Pond, you fell in. The Crown Prince protected the side consort instead. Are you and the Crown Prince not on good terms? If anyone else asked, it would be improper. But Julian Yuan had saved my life. I could say a little. He doesn't like me. He only wanted to use my status as the legitimate eldest daughter so he could marry my sister. I'll take it as repayment for what he did back then. Julian Yuan looked at me as if he wanted to say something, then held it back. If he doesn't like you, then end it cleanly. Staying with a man like that will only hurt you more. The words were even more improper. When he saw my silence, he immediately apologized. It's fine, and you're not wrong. I've already written a divorce agreement with Alexander Liu. In a few days, I'll return to the palace to retrieve it. So that's how it is. Julian Yuan looked at me and smiled, his meaning unreadable. In the blink of an eye, several days passed. I returned to the Eastern Palace to look for Alexander Liu. He wasn't there. Instead, I heard news that shook me to the core. At this year's Ten Kingdoms festival, the Bo Kingdom had proposed a political marriage with Great Liang, and they had even named the bride, Alexander Liu's secondary consort, Lily Bai. The Bo Kingdom lay on Great Liang's northwest frontier. In recent years it had grown powerful, and it clearly meant to contest territory with Great Liang. Foreign lands might be freer in custom, but Lily Bai was pregnant. The insult was so great that Alexander Liu smashed a teacup on the spot. Lily Bai came to me in a panic. The moment she stepped inside, she burst into tears and dropped to her knees at my feet. Please, sister, save me. I'd rather die than marry that old man from the Bo Kingdom. The Bo Kingdom wanted Lily Bai to marry the most exalted man of their realm, the only non-royal prince. If she went, she would become his primary wife, higher in status than she was now. But this prince had never shown his face in public. Some rumors said he was hideous. Others claimed he was stunning. Yet most people were convinced he was an old man. A greasy, pot-bellied old man, old enough to be Lily Bai's father. What can I do? I asked. The crown prince and father are already pleading before the emperor. If they can't change his mind, what can I possibly do? A sharp light flashed in Lily Bai's eyes. Aren't you close to that envoy, Julian Yuan? Go beg him. A chill crept into my expression. Lily Bai was overestimating me. I'd only met Julian Yuan a few times. How could I possibly sway him? When I still wouldn't agree, Lily Bai suddenly surged to her feet, teeth clenched. Fine, if you won't help me, then I'll tell you the truth. 10 years ago on Phoenixon Mountain, the one who saved you wasn't Alexander Liu. It was someone from the Bo Kingdom. Alexander Liu was only dragged into it and got hurt. After you woke up, you insisted he was your savior. Alexander Liu wanted to be with me, so he stole the credit. He lied to you so you'd marry him. Those words hit me like a thunderbolt. I knew Alexander Liu had lied about his feelings, but I hadn't known I'd mistaken my savior all these years. Someone from the Bo Kingdom. I suddenly remembered Julian Yuan pulling me out of danger just days ago. Was it him? I had to ask. I had to know. I left in a hurry. Behind me, Lily Bai shouted bitterly, "He doesn't even love you, so why can't you go marry for peace in my place?" What kind of twisted logic was that? That night, I found Alexander Liu in the courtyard study, worn to the bone with exhaustion. I asked him outright about what had really happened back then. To my surprise, he admitted it without hesitation. He had taken Julian Yuan's place as my savior. That was why, at the Ten Kingdoms festival banquet, Alexander Liu couldn't help showing off in front of Julian Yuan. Addie. It wasn't the first time he'd called me that, but this time, it made my skin go cold. Can you go marry for peace in Lily's place? Birds of a feather. I'd expected Alexander Liu to say it, but when the words finally came, my ears rang and my vision swam. I forced myself to stay upright. I wouldn't show even a trace of fear in front of him. Alexander Liu cared about pride. Sending his own woman off for peace was already a humiliating disgrace. Don't worry, he said. The day I take the throne, I'll march north and bring you back. And this divorce agreement, if you agree, I'll stamp it right away. Trade one woman for the stability of a whole people. There was no bargain cheaper than that. Fine, I'll marry. I didn't know how I managed to say those 3 words. The taste of blood rose in my mouth. I'd bitten my lip open. No smile appeared on Alexander Liu's face. Instead, stormy anger gathered there. The Bo Kingdom, I'll destroy it. After that day, word spread like wildfire. The crown prince's secondary consort was being sent to the Bow Kingdom for peace. Yet the one who looked truly miserable was the crown princess, Adeline Bai. I'd already decided. On the way, I would find a chance to slip away. Peace, marriage, bargains, I didn't care about any of it. A regime held together by sacrificing women would collapse sooner or later. Inside the palace, everyone was preparing for the happy occasion. No one smiled. They said this non-royal prince of the Bow Kingdom would come in person to escort the bride. That showed how seriously he took this marriage. I didn't know how Lily Bai managed to work her way among the nobles of both nations, but somehow she charmed one after another until people were tripping over themselves for her. The day before I was sent off, Father brought the family to the palace to see me. Once I left, we might never meet again in this life. Father, I'll come back, I said firmly. He thought I was only trying to comfort him, but I'd already made up my mind. If I couldn't escape, I would rather die than marry. I didn't believe a single word of Alexander Lu's promise to rescue me. On the day of the peace marriage, the spectacle was immense. The whole city knew. I lifted a corner of the carriage curtain. I caught a glimpse of that non-royal prince on a tall horse. He was slender. He didn't look as terrifying as the rumors claimed. When we reached Baoshan Pass, the party stopped to rest. They booked the largest inn for me and reserved the best room. But no matter how respectful he was, it changed nothing. Tonight was my best chance to escape. Under cover of a dark, windy night, I slipped out while the guards downstairs changed shifts. Dressed in plain clothes, I melted into the shadows. No one in the Bow Kingdom entourage had seen my face except Julian Yuan. As long as I avoided him, I could get away. I turned into a dim alley. I was about to pretend to be a refugee and ask the nearby residents for help when footsteps sounded behind me. Tap, tap. Whoever it was walked with steady purpose. It made me think of a hunter carrying captured prey. I broke into a run. The sound vanished. In the next second, a green mask with bared fangs appeared right in front of me. Before I could cry out, he slammed me against the wall. The hard stone drove into my back, and I let out a muffled groan. The gaze behind the mask shifted. His hand pressed against my back. "Why are you running?" I recognized him. He was the man who'd ridden at the very front of the procession during the day, the mysterious non-royal prince of the Bow Kingdom. I had imagined many ways we might meet. None of them ended well. Yet now that he stood before me, I realized I wasn't as afraid as I'd expected. "I just came out for a walk." A lie no ghost would believe, yet he nodded anyway. "I was focused on the road," he said. "I did neglect the feelings of the princess consort. I'll stop and rest more from now on." He stumbled over the words, just slightly. He didn't seem as monstrous as the tales. He escorted me back to my room, but didn't step inside. He even closed the door with deliberate care. Only the guards outside were doubled. I nearly collapsed onto the bed. My escape had failed. He would be on even higher alert now. I probably had no chance left. By the time we entered the Bow Royal Palace, even a bird couldn't get near me. They had to hold the Bow Kingdom's wedding rites. I let them dress and arrange me like a puppet while I calculated every possible way out. That night, our wedding night, the man entered with a faint scent of wine. The same terrifying mask still covered his face. I gripped the dagger hidden in my sleeve and forced my back straight. "Now that we're married," I said, "why not show me your real face?" He lowered his eyes, hesitated for a beat, then lifted a hand and removed the mask. A familiar face appeared before me. Julian Yuan. Regret flickered across his face. "I didn't reveal who I was because I was afraid you wouldn't agree, and I said I wanted to marry Lily Bai because I was sure Alexander Lu would set his sights on you." Julian Yuan moved closer, but still kept a careful distance. "I'm sorry, I used a despicable way to bring you here. I just couldn't stand watching Alexander Lu treat you like that." My mind still hadn't caught up. When I spoke, my voice came out hoarse. 10 years ago, you were the one who saved me, not Alexander Lu, right?" Julian Yuan pressed his lips together and nodded. "I was injured too. When I went back to look for you, you already believed it was Alexander Lu." He must have been devastated then. Something in my chest stirred. Julian Yuan told me he'd never forgotten me in these 10 years. The first time he saw me in Great Liang was at the hunting grounds. He'd never seen a girl so bold and radiant. He couldn't help following me. That tiger had been driven back by his blade when he was still young. Alexander Liu had simply taken the credit. So don't run anymore, all right? If you can't accept me, I can move into another hall. I nodded without thinking. My thoughts were tangled. I couldn't sort through any of it. Julian Yuan kept his word. From then on, he lived in the side palace. Apart from coming to eat with me, he never crossed the line. Even my clothes, food, shelter, and travel were the best he could find, personally chosen and sent to me. I wasn't made of wood. I couldn't pretend not to hear his restrained kindness. I managed the household smoothly and helped him with daily matters. I also distributed the rice seeds I'd brought from Great Liang. I taught the people more civilized knowledge. Almost overnight, the non-royal prince's consort became a name everyone praised. Whenever people spoke of the non-royal prince and his consort, it was nothing but compliments. But only I knew the truth. This was all I could do for him. As for the deception he'd used, I couldn't let it go. The Bo Kingdom had enemies on all sides. In the year and more since I'd come here, Julian Yuan's days at home didn't add up to even a full month. Whenever he returned, he was almost always wounded. This time was the worst. His shoulder had been pierced clean through. He nearly lost an arm. I said nothing as I applied medicine. He spoke animatedly about what he'd seen on the battlefield. After a long while, he finally noticed my mood. "What's wrong?" he asked. "You don't want to help me bandage it?" I tied the knot hard. He sucked in a sharp breath, grimacing. "Does the Bo Kingdom really need you, this non-royal prince, to fight its wars?" I snapped. "You've practically swallowed all the small nations around you." Now that the Bo Kingdom had annexed 4 countries, its territory was on the verge of surpassing Great Liang. Julian Yuan held my gaze. His voice turned rough. "I was afraid if I stayed in the manor every day, you'd get tired of me. So I asked to go to the front. That way I wouldn't do something that makes you unhappy." So he kept away, all because he feared I'd be annoyed. My nose stung. I hurried outside. I didn't want him to see me like this. Julian Yuan panicked. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into his embrace. "Do you still hate me?" he asked urgently. "I don't know what else I can do." Something inside me softened. A sour, aching numbness surged up, wave after wave. I lifted my hand and laid my palm over the back of his hand. He stiffened at once. "You've done well," I said. "Thank you." "There's something I haven't told you." After a pause, Julian Yuan continued. "The Great Liang Emperor has died. The new emperor will ascend soon. The Bo Kingdom will declare war on Great Liang before long." I'd expected it, yet hearing him say it still filled me with grief. The Bo Kingdom was growing stronger by the day, but it still had to pay annual tribute, bleeding gold and silver. How could they accept remaining beneath Great Liang? "I won't massacre cities," he said. "I won't harm any innocent people of Great Liang. That's your homeland. I'll do everything I can to keep it whole." Duty to his nation on one side, the homeland of the woman he loved on the other. Julian Yuan had no choice. "That's enough," I said. "That's already good." The tide of history was inevitable. There was no point struggling against it. Maybe it was because we'd finally spoken plainly that day. After that, Julian Yuan appeared before me more often. I tried to understand him more. I watched him train soldiers. I watched him frown over documents. Sometimes he'd start to scold his men, then remember I was there and his anger would fade halfway. Little by little, Julian Yuan unfolded into a living person before my eyes. By the time I realized he filled my gaze, I'd already grown unused to his every departure. When word reached the Bo Kingdom that the new Great Liang Emperor had ascended, Julian Yuan prepared to leave at once. "This war will probably last a long time," he said. "Stay home and wait for me." Not just a long time. It might be a battle where life and death were uncertain. I had no appetite. I turned and dug out a gold-threaded vest from my dowry. "Wear this," I said. "It might help." The vest resisted fire and water, and blades couldn't pierce it. In a crisis, it might save his life. Julian Yuan stroked the vest with his thumb. Warm light filled his eyes. "I heard the new Emperor of Great Liang will personally lead the campaign. If I meet him on the battlefield, I will." Don't hold back. We understood each other well enough for me to know what he meant. "This is a contest between nations," I said. "Don't mix in personal feelings." Back then, when he proposed sending me in Lily Bai's place, he promised he'd bring me back. I never believed a word of his hypocrisy. You don't need to worry about me. My bluntness seemed to startle Julian Yuan. Maybe he heard what lay beneath it, that I didn't want to leave him. Soon, the Bo Kingdom army marched south. Every day, battle reports flew into the palace and the prince's manor like snowflakes. The fighting was fierce and deadlocked. One day you took a city, the next day they seized land back. Worse still, Julian Yuan's shoulder, not yet healed, was struck by an arrow again. I burned with anxiety, unable to sleep or eat for days. All I could see was Julian Yuan bleeding. Sadie, pack my things, prepare a horse. Princess consort, where are you going? I couldn't sit still. The decisive battle between the two countries was near. Great Leon's elite force, the Bloodhand Corps, had been trained in secret. It had never appeared in any battle report. Alexander Liu would surely save them for a final blow against the Bo Kingdom. I knew how terrifying the Bloodhand Corps was. Wherever they passed, nothing lived. I'm going to Coldmount Ridge, I said. Send word to the prince. Tell him I'll be there soon. But I was still a step too late. When I arrived at the Coldmount Ridge camp, flames towered into the sky. Killing was everywhere. On one side were Bo Kingdom soldiers. On the other were the Bloodhand Corps in red robes and iron armor. Alexander Liu really had used them for a surprise attack. When the Bloodhand soldiers saw me ride in, especially as a woman, 2 or 3 rushed me at once. The best way to deal with them was to keep them from closing in. I drew my bow, knocked arrows, and carved a path through blood. Julian Yuan. Maybe it was instinct. The moment he turned, I caught his eyes. Watch out! A Bloodhand soldier leapt onto Julian Yuan's horse and swung a blade. My breath caught. I loosed 2 arrows and drove them clean through him. Julian Yuan frowned but said nothing. He turned back to direct the formation and crush the enemy. Unease hammered in my chest. Today's attackers were only a small unit. Their goal was to burn supplies. Clearing them out was only a matter of time. And yet, maybe it was my imagination, Julian Yuan looked half feral with killing. Half an hour later, the Bo Kingdom camp fell quiet again. Julian Yuan came toward me, sword in hand, drenched in blood. Come inside. A strange feeling rose in me, as if I were about to be interrogated. I'd seen blood seeping from his shoulder. I brought medicine, intending to change his bandage. Take your clothes off. On Julian Yuan's cold face, surprise flickered for a moment. I curved my lips. What are you thinking? I'm changing your bandage. He caught my hand and looked up at me in the candlelight. Why did you come to a place this dangerous? My thoughts drifted. If those 2 arrows hadn't flown in time, he would have been wounded again. I was worried about you, I said. And it turns out I came just in time. I pushed his hand away and stripped off his armor. Blood had soaked a broad patch of cloth at his shoulder. I glanced at him. He lowered his eyes, lashes trembling, lost in thought. The wound beneath was horrifying, new injury layered over old. As I applied the medicine, my vision blurred. Julian Yuan suddenly lifted my chin. His thumb wiped the wetness from the corner of my eye. His gaze was so tender, nothing like the battlefield demon he'd been. Thank you for coming, he said softly. I'm happy. But what? Stop hesitating. I bent down and sealed his mouth with mine. I was mortified by my own inexperience and impulsiveness, until Julian Yuan took control. He gripped my waist and pulled me hard against his chest. The bandage I hadn't finished tying came loose again. But in that moment, who cared about bandages? Years of buried feeling broke loose all at once, and there was no stopping it. The sounds from the general's tent lasted all night. I slept until late morning. Julian Yuan looked refreshed. When I went to find him, he was discussing tactics with his men for dealing with the Bloodhand Corps. The Bloodhand Corps was hard to face, but if you kept them from closing in, they were much easier to break. Assign the best archers in the army, I said. To get the Bloodhand Corps onto the field, Alexander Liu will definitely deploy many archers to cover them. You should send an elite unit to take out their archers in a surprise strike. When Julian Yuan saw me, the worry in his eyes vanished. Why didn't you sleep more? He asked. What do you want to eat? I'll have them make it. Behind him, the soldiers all lowered their heads. So the fearsome non-royal prince, unmatched in battle, was just like them in front of his wife. Watch yourself, I said. I tried to pull my hand free, but he laced his fingers through mine and drew me straight to his seat. We'll do it exactly as the princess consort says. The plan they'd been discussing lay on the table. I skimmed it. It was almost identical to what I'd suggested. He really was a military genius. After a single clash, he'd already read their pattern and devised a counter. The raid last night hadn't truly succeeded, but it had still burned half the provisions. It seemed Julian Yuan would have to advance soon. For some reason, my right eyelid wouldn't stop twitching. A constant dread coiled in my chest. Sure enough, a few days later, Sadie had someone deliver a letter from home. I read it once, and my legs nearly gave out. The Bai family had been framed. Father had been angered into a bedridden illness. Now he was barely hanging on, waiting for me to see him one last time. The letter was in my family's own hand. I recognized the writing. When Julian Yuan heard, he immediately gave orders, made preparations, and sent men to escort me back to Great Leon in secret. The Great Leon capital city. After more than a year away, returning now felt like stepping into a world I barely recognized. White cloth hung at the gates of Bai Manor. The bustle of the past was gone. In this vast estate, there wasn't even a servant to guide me. I walked into the morning hall in a daze and instantly felt something was wrong. No memorial tablets, no coffin. Empty. So empty there wasn't a single person. Alarm shot through me. I turned to leave. Bang! The main doors slammed shut. A trap. Footsteps sounded behind me. I steadied myself and saw a face I knew all too well. A year had passed. Alexander Liu had grown thinner, his gaze darker than ever. I told you, he said. I would bring you back. I sneered. So you dragged me back with a trick like this? Alexander Liu walked toward me slowly, grief written across his face. He liked you from the start. Saying he wanted to marry Lily Bai was just an excuse, wasn't it? I've heard how affectionate you two are in the Bo Kingdom. So I'm the one who got played. What do you want? I demanded. He hadn't lured me back to Great Leon just to vent. Alexander Liu shook his head and gave a cold laugh. What do you think? You're a citizen of Great Leon. You used to be mine. Now Great Leon is on the brink. Shouldn't you do something? He wanted me to be a spy to feed him information. I didn't know where his confidence came from. Then lock me up, I said flatly. Alexander Liu looked stunned. If I refuse, will you let me go? I went on. No, so don't waste your breath. His jaw tightened, as if he hadn't expected me to turn him down so cleanly. Guards, take the Crown Princess to the side chambers. Crown Princess. A year later, what was he still clinging to? In the Bo Kingdom, I'd heard plenty about Alexander Liu and Lily Bai. They said that after Lily Bai gave birth, he gradually neglected her. She grew anxious and unstable, her mind beginning to fracture, and Alexander Liu took in a whole harem of concubines. Even the Empress's seat was still empty. Lily Bai had once basked in favor, but she still never sat where she wanted most. Alexander Liu confined me in a room with guards posted outside. The soldiers who had escorted me were outside the city. If night fell and I hadn't returned, they would go back and report. More importantly, this was Bai Manor. I knew it better than Alexander Liu ever could. In less than 3 days, I heard the guards chatting. The Bo Kingdom was advancing. The Bo Kingdom army had already reached the outskirts of the capital. The city could fall at any moment. Now, as a child, I'd played in these side chambers countless times. I knew there was a broken window, one I could pry open easily with a small tool. I slipped out through it during a guard change. Alexander Liu had moved the military affairs office here just to keep watch on me. I crept through the estate and finally found where they were meeting. The Bloodhand Corps was Alexander Liu's last trump card. He meant to gamble everything. To cover the Bloodhand Corps, he had buried huge amounts of black powder beneath the base of the city walls. If Julian Yuan tried to take the city by force, he would be blown apart in a single strike. I had to get this message to Julian Yuan immediately. Using the rockery as cover, I slipped into the rear courtyard. A secret tunnel was there. When I was little, I dug it with my younger siblings just for fun. Alexander Liu would never know. But the moment I ran out of Bai Manor, the street erupted in chaos. People fled in panic. Beyond the city gate, the clash of armies shook the air. Too late. I couldn't think anymore. I grabbed a soldier's horse. Alexander Liu finally realized what was happening and chased after me with his men. Trapped inside the capital, I knew Julian Yuan would lose control and storm the city, no matter what. Don't enter the city. Don't enter the city. Alexander Lu pursued relentlessly. Then the city gate exploded with a deafening roar, one blast after another, so loud it tore at my ears. It detonated. Tears burst from my eyes. All I wanted was to see Julian Yuan. The city wall collapsed with a thunderous crash. Dust and smoke billowed as an ocean of troops surged into the capital. Julian Yuan rode hard, charging through the smoke and slammed into my sight. In that instant, I understood what it meant to last a lifetime. Addie. Amid the chaos of war, I clung to Julian Yuan. The familiar scent of spices on him made me feel safe beyond words. Alexander Lu had nowhere left to run. In the end, Bo Kingdom soldiers took him alive. Julian Yuan, I asked, will you still ask the Emperor for permission to go to war in the future? He paused, then smiled. No. From now on, I only want to be a prince who lives a life of wind, flowers, snow, and moon with you.